Welcome to Marketing Murder Mystery. I'm your host, Michael Graham. We're going to navigate the dangerous neighborhood of America's media environment that no marketing pro wants to enter. This week, the perils of politics. There's an old saying that business and politics don't mix, but in today's woke era, it sometimes seems politics is impossible to avoid. When Democratic candidates have to carefully avoid certain fast food chains for fear of upsetting their fans, or when retail outlets like Hobby Lobby become synonyms for political debates, it's clear that while your brand may not care about politics, there's a very real chance that one day politics will care about you. So, should brands take a public stand on political issues? What will the impact be on the company, on its image, on its customers? And is not taking a stand now a stand in and of itself? Joining me to discuss this question are marketing detectives Linda Fenneris and Rob Atkinson of Millennium Agency with offices in Boston and Manchester, New Hampshire. Hello, Linda. Hello, Rob.
Hey, Michael.
Hi,
Good
Michael.
to be here.
Manchester, New Hampshire, to me is the key part because you cannot navigate the world of New Hampshire without being forced to bump into politics. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree.
Absolutely. I was walking down the street the other day and I ran into two candidates. And one of them I didn't even bother to meet.
Really?
I mean, that's how bad it is.
New Hampshire is known for politics. It's kind of like it's one of its exports. You know, Vermont got the maple syrup. I still don't understand, by the way, how New Hampshire lost that fight. But Vermont got the maple syrup, so New Hampshire has politics. And Rob, something jumped out at you in the Trump era, and that is the rise of the hashtag movement and how it can affect businesses who want to have no business whatsoever to do with politics.
Yeah, it's incredible, Michael. There's a group out there called #GrabYourWallet. And what they're doing is really remarkable in today's marketing world. They're targeting companies that have basically contributed to the financial contributions of the Trump administration. And they're asking people to boycott these companies. And companies are listening. They're afraid of this movement, and they're actually divesting themselves from the Trump administration. And already, 31 companies have already said that they're not going to contribute to the Trump administration this time around.
And when you say the Trump administration, you actually mean the Trump campaign.
Yeah, the
right?
PAC, the Super PAC to
exactly.
elect President Trump.
For decades, companies or employees have given money to politics. That's why we have PACs, so you can have corporate donors. And now the brand of the company is being punished for the behavior of the people or the decision of the company to, say, participate in the inauguration, which how normal American politics is that? Linda, what are companies supposed to do in an environment where behavior that was completely reasonable, that was cheered when they were doing it for, say, Barack Obama or George W. Bush, is now not just being denounced in the world of politics, but people are going after your customers?
Right. Well, definitely today, I would say consumers are seeing brands as getting absolutely more political than they have before. I mean, 30% of the Americans today are actually boycotting brands that they would have never boycotted in the past. So I think from a corporation's perspective, they really need to take a hard look at the risk associated with really connecting themselves with a political candidate or a political side. I mean, obviously in some instances like Nike, Chick-fil-A, and obviously many others, it can prove to be very beneficial. However, corporations really need to take a strong look at the pros and the cons and how their loyal customer base will respond.
You know, I want to add though, Linda, that, you know, it's not the corporations too, it's just the CEO. And the CEOs can contribute to the Trump administration and the whole company will be punished for that one contribution. And sometimes it's as little as $1,000 just for, a personal contribution to the Trump campaign.
So you bring up two different elements that I think the marketing people have to look at. So let's start with the intentional one. What do you guys think of the strategy of, say, Gillette to do a Me Too TV ad to push their brand out on the edge? For Nike to do the shoes with the Betsy Ross flag, that allowed millions of Americans to learn that that little round star thing was, in fact, the Betsy Ross flag, which, and that was somehow offensive to somebody, which almost nobody knew. What do you think of brands who decide, you know what, we're going to own politics? And is that a smart, dangerous, dumb? What do you think of those decisions?
I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I do not think it makes a lot of sense to connect your brand with politics. It just can cause fire. As far as Gillette is concerned, I mean, frankly, I thought it was a great clip. However, you know, sales have actually decreased because of that. However, we do not know over the long term whether things will actually turn around because of that, because they have taken a stance on that. And I think that's part of a corporation really understanding who they are and what they stand for. And if they embrace that, I think in the long term, they really will see a positive end result. And I do believe that that's a key factor.
Well, you know, it all goes into this whole idea of woke advertising and companies that are supposed to be walking the talk that they're preaching. In a recent study by Morning Consult, they actually asked that question: should brands generally avoid engaging with Trump? They found out that, you know, it usually will result in a more negative backlash than benefit by doing it. You know, but it's not always so clear cut. In this era of woke advertising, companies have to really walk the talk. So Nike did it with their advertising campaign. Gillette tried to do it with a huge backlash, and you could argue whether or not that advertising campaign was the reason why their sales are down. Some people would say it's because more guys are growing beards, and then also that there's these $1-a-month shave online companies that are kind of taking over. But certainly, I think everyone says it had some type of impact. We just don't know what is.
So here's the question that I would have is, what the heck am I doing taking my brand that I have worked so long to build, like, for example, Nike, and putting it in the hands of some political actor? I mean, for example, Donald Trump just won an election. There was a time where he was at least popular enough to win an election. Well, if you'd hitched your wagon to his brand, his polling numbers have gone steadily down since he took the White House. You know, there was a time when Bill Clinton was the most popular Democrat in the Democratic Party. Not long ago, the New Hampshire Democratic Party stripped his name from the name of their annual fundraising dinner because of his Me Too issues. So I'd be curious to know, as marketing professionals, what would you say to someone who said, I'm going to put the standing my brand in the hands of somebody that I don't know, that's just out, whether it's a politician or a political activist, whether it's the young lady who came over from Sweden to lecture America about global warming. I don't know what she's going to do next week. Is that part of the calculation that people should make?
Well, you know, it really depends on the subject. You know, I just want to refer back to this study again by Morning Consult. And they asked basically, are there any safe havens that you can endorse as a company and not get backlash? And I guess this isn't surprising, but the U.S. military was one area, reforming the criminal justice system, the rights of racial minorities in America. It's pretty much a safe bet that if you want to go out there as a company and support that, you'll get very little backlash. But where you get into trouble, though, is the campaign of a Republican lawmaker. That's where you're going to get into trouble. Or the right of protesters to kneel during the national anthem, or stricter policies preventing abortion. I mean, those kinds of things are just detrimental to your brand. But it's more difficult when you're trying to hitch a star, as Michael said, to a candidate in particular, because you know, Trump, excluding Trump, I mean, one gaffe of a politician can ruin their careers. I remember John Dean here in New Hampshire did the John Dean scream, and overnight he was done just for a scream, you know? So it's really kind of interesting.
We have millennials now, we have Gen Zs, we have baby boomers, and every one of those demographics look at this connection, political connection and branding differently. I mean, obviously the younger demographics have grown up with social media and ways to easily communicate with each other. They have a very open way about themselves. However, the older demographics tend to be much more private and conservative in nature. So if we take, for example, some of these younger demographics and we compare them to the older demographics, and then we take different political candidates, whether Republican or Democrats, and we start sort of dividing brands and dividing politics and dividing demographics. I think we're just honestly creating more of a divide in a sense from a branding perspective. And I think as time goes on, it can get even more complicated. So I think honestly, as companies start to look at politics in their business and whether they should try to maintain as much confidentiality as possible, they really need to look at the long-term, negative or positive impacts that this can create. Because over time, it will make a serious impact on their business.
We work with a client right now that is working with a hemp company, and they're going to start manufacturing a hemp product. Right. A few years ago, I think there might have been huge backlash for someone to try to jump into the hemp background. So, the other thing is, as we go through as marketers, we have to understand that the social norms are changing all around us, and that we have to kind of read the tea leaves and see where everything's going, because if we don't, someone's going to be at a competitive disadvantage.
Now I want you to talk to that poor schmuck who's sitting in an office somewhere. The guy who used to be on the board at Mozilla, one of the top, website companies. They were a very popular Silicon Valley major player. One guy, the CEO, writes one check as part of a statewide referendum on whether or not they should change marriage laws. Mm-hmm. And suddenly you wake up and there's your brand in the paper. We're boycotting you. We're not boycotting him. We're boycotting you. Or a politician shows up at your business storefront, to do an appearance having to do something around you. And people start hashtagging, ban them. They let, the candidate I hate walk in their store. They sold him a cider donut. I'm never going there again in my life. I mean, all of these ways now that people are finding themselves besieged in politics that they as a company had no interest in being a part of. Maybe the best example is Chick-fil-A, where the family has a religious view. For decades, their business went along. Nobody cared. Suddenly, some people made an issue out of it. And suddenly, Chick-fil-A is now shorthand for, where your position is on traditional family values.
Yeah, but the Chick-fil-A example is really interesting. So not only did the CEO come out and say basically that they were against gay marriage, but he made no bones about it. He's since apologized, but what did he do? He ended up opening more stores up. He charges more for his Chick-fil-A sandwiches now, and because his loyalist brand of flocks to Chick-fil-A, sales are way up. Mm-hmm. So they are
on the verge of passing Starbucks when it comes to net revenue.
Which is incredible. Think about that. I mean, that's a remarkable stance in light of what they've done. I mean, they don't even open up on Sundays.
6 days a week.
6 days a week, and
But I think that's a separate. Once again, that's back to owning. They decided once the controversy hit, they were already owning this brand. In other words, they didn't have to change anything. They already were a company that said, our company model is going to reflect our personal values. What's changed is that after 30 years of nobody caring, suddenly you shall be forced to care. So I want to go back to, what about these companies who have no values? Like the good American model of completely amoral SOBs who are just trying to make money, like me. What are we supposed to do when suddenly someone starts a hashtag because one of our employees showed up at a pro or anti-fracking rally, and now I've got hashtag boycott Michael Graham? Any tips? And start kind of go through the before, during, and after. First of all, what should companies do now, anticipating the possibility that they could find themselves under fire for nothing having to do with corporate policy?
One of the single most important strategies about branding is that you have to know and identify who you are. And you have to determine that in the front end. So regardless of where you are in your political views, if you know what you stand for as a corporation, it doesn't matter what the guy down the street thinks, or it doesn't matter who stops in your store, what political candidate it is. So I believe that this is why branding is such an important element of any company, is that really drilling down and figuring out who you are and how you want to be seen or perceived is number one. So I guess back to your question is, what can companies do? I think if they first figure out who they are
Right.
and what they stand for, that will take care of a lot of the questions and potential issues, because they can answer any question that comes up, and they have to be prepared.
So, Rob, step number one is make your brand bulletproof. If you know what your brand is and where you're going, that's one way to fend off these odd incidents, because you know who you are. That's kind of what happened to Chick-fil-A. They didn't have to change anything. They knew who they were when the attack came. They just kept being who they were. Any other insights on the pre-crisis strategies?
So the second point you could really have to remember is that Americans are twice as likely to boycott a brand rather than boycott. And what I mean by boycott is that they're going to support that brand, as in, like we talked about with Chick-fil-A. Drilling down on those numbers, something really interesting popped out at me is that 29% of consumers say they have stopped purchasing from a brand because of a political stance. So you really do have to be aware of the shifting quicksand below you, because it's changing so quickly. Social norms have changed so much. I mean, if you look at, again, like cannabis or politics, social media has just made those issues can literally change overnight.
So now let's say you wake up one day and you see that someone decides your restaurant, whatever, they had a dog and you didn't like the fact that it was a dog, and you asked the dog owner, we don't allow dogs in the restaurant, it's not allowed. And the next day it's hashtag dog hater burger joint, What is your strategy for when the boycott threats and attacks on a company start? Should you react immediately? Is social media too ephemeral? In other words, do you just say, sure, it lasts for 30 minutes and then they moved on to the next hashtag? What's your strategy?
Look at Philadelphia, right? Where they're actually targeting local stores that had contributed $200 or more to the Trump campaign, and now they're publicizing those donors. Well, these are people who own restaurants, small stores, have families. I mean, there comes a tipping point where it might be, too far in terms of trying to shame somebody for their beliefs. And so that I think the real recommendation here is to own it and to have transparency. I mean, in this fractured world, you can't go back and erase how you voted. So you should just say, yes, I voted for Trump, and move on. I mean, people who like your store are going to still come back. And in fact, we see that people who actually perceive a brand as quality will actually go back to a store even if there is a boycott in place on that product.
I mean, as far as companies are concerned, obviously, this is all about public relations, right? And every company that faces, I guess in this instance, could be a crisis, needs to develop a crisis plan. How will they address the situation in the market? How will they speak to their constituents out there? And obviously being honest, open, to the point can be the most effective way to get out there. And I think as long as companies really, again, weigh their pros and cons and how this will impact their current target markets or base.
Yeah, it's always the cover-up people get in trouble with. You ever notice that? It's not, people will forgive them if they come out and own it. But when they try to cover it up or stall or delay, that's where they always get into trouble, whether it's politics or corporations.
So do you have a metric for when a business should respond? Someone sees a car parked outside of a building with a candidate's bumper sticker on it. And so they decide they're going to make an issue, and they take a picture, and there's your brand, Phil's restaurant, whatever, and then there's the bumper sticker. And then, so it goes out. Do you care if there's, 5 tweets, if there's a Facebook page?
I think it has to be proportionate, right? So, 5 tweets, maybe not. But 5,000, all of a sudden, if I'm a small business owner and I see 5,000 tweets against my business, I'm going to take notice.
I would have panicked a lot before 5,000. I got to be honest, Linda. Do you have people in your business, if you have enough, like let's say you have a marketing person at your company, should it be part of their job to use Google search and other technologies to track you on social media? and track
Absolutely.
references?
One of the top things that you should be doing is really tracking the conversations that are having that others are having about your company out there, regardless of what social media platform that may be on. Because some of them they'll eventually just die down on their own, and others will just take a life of their own. So those are the ones that you really want to pay attention to and make sure that you respond to in the most effective way possible.
So now what should a company say when they're caught in, to me, this is a new dilemma of the woke marketing that Rob was talking about, where the company says, we don't do politics. We sell spring water. We landscape lawns. That's what we do. And they're met with the demand, particularly from younger consumers, 30 and younger. You must take a side. Not taking a side is taking a side. From a marketing standpoint, how do you address that argument?
I think the demographics are super important to understand on this, because studies will show that younger demographics especially will act with their wallet and engage in, say, if a brand does this, then I'm not going to use that brand. But older demographics will say, don't mess with it. Brands shouldn't mess with politics. So I think that you have to understand who you're marketing to. So if your company is marketing to a younger demographic, you're going to be forced to take action much more than an older demographic. And then you can monitor that and make decisions along the way.
So, Linda, you don't think that there's a transparent position of, we don't do politics, we are never going to do politics, and you can hashtag us all you want?
Well, I think because we have social media and we have so many other ways to find out about people, that people can just get the information that they want and figure out what side you are on, whether it's the CEO or somebody answering the phone. So that obviously can impact, a situation like this. So do I think companies should get involved? No, I think it just complicates matters. So unless they take the time to really, like I said, weigh the pros and cons out of all of this, it seems to me that it would make more sense to take a step back.
So what's interesting is in the case of Mozilla, where the CEO gave a single check and was driven out of his job and the company did a massive apology, whatever, is that the people who started the boycott immediately withdrew and said they regretted the fact that this isn't what they wanted to see happening, because they said, it makes us look like we're censoring people. Now, some cynical people might say, well, because you are. When you punish people for having an opinion you don't like, that's not exactly endorsing free speech. Is there a lane for people, once again, people whose business model doesn't involve politics? You don't sell guns. You're not targeting 18-year-old hemp growers. You really do are in the basic business of real estate or something, to say, our position is we affirm free speech, and that is our political statement, and we welcome everyone to speak. Is that a lane that a business can navigate, or does that take too much work and all you can do is hide under a rock and wait for the trouble to go away?
I think if you do that, you do it at your own peril, right? A brand can still take sides, but it's really a tightrope if they're going to survive or not. They could fall either way. So, it's a risky proposition.
Corporations are corporations to be successful and be profitable, and when they start to step their toe into things that I guess are off their frankly core competencies, it just messes up the water. So from a pure corporation or big brand perspective, focusing in on their core competencies and growing those product lines and markets are number one. The political piece just adds potentially chaos and confusion to everything. So unless that's played out properly, I think in the long run it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
So a large business organization recently rewrote their guiding principles. And they said our primary purpose is no longer to make a profit. It is now to be part of the community and to whatever. And I sat there reading that going, ladies and gentlemen, you are making a terrible, terrible mistake. Because once you enter these waters, which are great waters, by the way, for nonprofits and and political candidates and social groups, whatever. But once you enter the waters where you're going to say, okay, I'm not just here to make money. I'm here to answer your other questions and needs as well. Somewhere there was a marketing department that was looking longingly at the upper story windows going, how are we going to do this?
Right.
Because the market is full of people who have all kinds of different ideas about this. You want to fight poverty. Okay, great. Some people say the way to fight poverty is to end social spending because it generates a generation of people who are addicted to government programs. Other people say, no, we should have socialism. So now we're going to have what? Corporations for socialism? I'm sorry. Linda makes a lot of good points about thinking long-term about what it is your company, your business is prepared to deal with and what it's not. Social change, I don't know how many companies have a department of social change that I would trust to handle that.
So every MBA in America studies what you're just talking about. And what's interesting about the change that happened is that they're not affirming their stance towards communism or socialism. I think they're reaffirming their stance towards respecting the rights of the worker, respecting the honesty of the supply chain, and then the integrity of the marketing of all of that. And corporate profits will result if you take care of your workers and you're honest and you are, doing a good business, then you will succeed. And that's where the profits will come from. And that's the shift that's happening in America today, is that, this woke marketing and woke capitalism is influencing how we go about. Our generation, just cared about profits. Mm-hmm. This generation does not care about profits as much. They care about quality of life. They care about all sorts of things that don't fit in that first definition.
So what you're saying is that the victim of this week's marketing murder mystery is in fact corporate profits and the entire economic system. We want you to all run your businesses, but don't worry about making money. Don't worry about making money. Because trust me, what you don't make in money will make up in volume.
I think there is a huge turn happening in America. And this is a big boat. I mean, this is a giant oil tanker out on the sea, and it's going to take time.
Now he said oil tanker, so now we're going to get boycotted by people who are fighting. Hashtag climate strike. So that's our marketing murder mystery of the week, a broad look at the marketing issues relating to politics and social issues. Every week, we're also going to bring you a marketing crime of the week, and we'll get that from Rob in just a second. But first, Linda, because this podcast is designed for people who have to deal with marketing, maybe the marketing crew at a firm, etc., you're going to give us a marketing tip every week. What's your marketing tip, marketing 101 tip for the amateur marketing would-be professional out there?
Yes, my tip is, we know every corporation needs to have a brand. That's number one. Number two, they should have what I'll call a unique selling proposition, and that's that emotional connect that you think of when you think of a brand. Whether you're drinking Pepsi or Coke, you have a feeling that goes with that. So a lot of these large corporations take a serious effort in developing what they call their unique selling proposition. Let's take Walmart, for example. Low prices guaranteed. You hear it time and time again. So you, in your mind, expect to get the lowest prices possible at Walmart.
It's not just low prices. Everyone says low prices, low. I mean, you hear it all the time. But low prices guaranteed. In other words, they're connecting, hey, I got your back, man. I'm going to get you those low prices. And that's, I think, part of the power of that one. Give me another one.
Let's talk about Amazon. I mean, they've been pushing the next day delivery, which worked amazingly for them. Now they're going for the same day delivery.
I like the fact that as a consumer, it tells me, we know you're a moron. We know that you were supposed to have bought X. You told your wife you'd have it. You had all week to buy it. Now you need it tomorrow. Don't worry, idiot. We're on your side. Give me another one.
So if we all think back a little bit of Avis, We Try Harder, that was actually a great strategy because they were in the number 2 position, and they said, we're okay being in the number 2 position. And that's what we're going to actually boast.
Do you think that people, humans are such emotional animals? And so, when I first started having to do marketing for political candidates, et cetera, I would kind of laugh at some of the hokey things that people wanted to do. And I realized, because I was finally paying attention, oh my gosh, some of this hokey stuff works. I just wonder how many people said, you know what? I'm going to go to Avis. Hertz has enough business. I'm going to go to... Do you think people, human animals, really respond that way to marketing?
It does. It worked. It worked great for them.
But not quite good enough for them to be number 1. Thank you for listening to the Marketing Murder Mystery podcast. It's brought to you by Millennium Agency. They have offices in Boston and Manchester, New Hampshire. You can find them on the web at mill.agency. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Rob. I'm your host, Michael Graham.